later today, so you can keep up with her via her
important.
blogging. Yes, Dr. Samant has co-founded a yoga and an Ayurveda foundations in Bangalore. She's a native of Goa and has practiced in both India and the United States. So we all want to welcome you. Namaste, Dr. Samant.
Namaste.
Yes.
Thanks for having me.
Yes, of course. One of the first questions we want to start out with is, what is Ayurveda and how is it different from modern biomedicine?
I would say radically different. See, we all are exposed to the, I would say, medicalized Ayurveda nowadays, and we think that knowledge of herbs or taking certain herbs to feel healthy or maintaining a certain diet and lifestyle, that means Ayurveda. But actually, it's very different. We kind of have lost touch with what Ayurveda actually is, even in terms of the education which is given to students nowadays in terms of Ayurveda. But Ayurveda is, I would say, something which connects a human being with its nature and highlights the fact that there are many commonalities between the nature and fundamental commonalities between the nature and human, and highlights this aspect as its holistic approach to health. It is not just about an individual, or it is not just about diseases and treating them, but about an individual, his community, his society, and what helps in maintaining the well-being of all of these. So it's a very, I would say, it's a multidisciplinary approach to health and well-being of people, not essentially treating diseases. That would, I would say, and compared to that, modern biomedicine basically focuses on treatment of disorders and diseases, and the approach, the cohesive approach to health of individuals and applying that to health of communities in terms of mental well-being and emotional well-being and well-being of societies as a whole is, I would say, missing.
I see. So, Dr. Samant, this actually kind of reminds me of some of the verbiage that yoga practitioners and teachers also use. And I know I didn't put this question in our discussions, but how is then yoga related to Ayurveda as a subsection or a sub-question? If you can address it, please.
So yoga and Ayurveda are sister concern sciences for the fact that both of them have many similarities in basic principles that they follow in terms of human body and mind and the soul, how they are connected with each other, how humans are connected with their nature and what kind of interactions take place between those, and how to balance them. So having a balance is something which both Ayurveda as well as yoga focuses through a slightly different approach, yes, but the ultimate aim is the same. Like Ayurveda focuses that why do you need to focus on health is just one aspect of Ayurveda. So Ayurveda says that you need to focus on health so that the four major aims of life, which are highlighted in the Hindu philosophy, you know, that you need to follow a good, you need to have good principles with which you lead your life, which we call as dharma. Then you need to have some source of leading that life, which we call as artha. And then you have karma, which are certain desires that you want to fulfill or duties that you want to fulfill through your life. And then finally moksha, which is union with the, the ultimate energy or the divine energy. And both these are common for yoga. While yoga tries to achieve this through by controlling our mind and soul and the physic through certain asanas and pranayamas and certain practices, Ayurveda does it through self-discipline and modulating your lifestyle and balancing your body with herbs and other modalities given by Ayurveda.
Great, thank you. And I know we will eventually get to COVID and how all this applies to us. But coming back to Ayurvedic physicians, what is the nature of training and what are some of the qualifications to become an Ayurvedic physician?
So here in India, we basically undergo the 10+2 basic education structure. You can call it like, basic high school education in India, in which the 10+2 years what we study after studying the 10th grade are we have to take a branch of science and have a background in biology and physics and chemistry. And then after that, we take up the 5.5-year course, which we call as BAMS or Bachelor's in Ayurveda Medicine and Surgery. offered by universities pertaining to individual states in India, or they could be deemed universities, either government or private. And after the graduation, earlier there are independent institutes which offer a master's course or a postgraduate degree in Ayurveda, in which we have around 10 specializations and more, depending on where you are applying. However, now there is a common entrance AIA PGT common entrance test throughout India, which a person has to take to be eligible for postgraduate training in Ayurveda. And there are several specializations. For example, I have done my master's from Gujarat Ayurveda University, which is one of the tier 1 universities in India. To give an example, I would say it's like our IIT or IM of Ayurveda, equivalent of that. We have 4 such universities in India. One is Gujarat Ayurveda University. One is the National Institute of Ayurveda in Jaipur, Rajasthan. Then you have the All India Institute of Ayurveda in Delhi. And you have the Banaras Hindu University in Uttar Pradesh. So these are the 4 tier 1 universities which offer masters in Ayurveda. And then you have several others throughout the state. Then if somebody wants to do further education, you have PhD as well in Ayurveda. So these are the levels of training that people undergo here in India related to Ayurveda. In the US, if somebody is interested in studying Ayurveda, then after your high school, I think there is a basic probably biology course that you need to have some background in biology to apply for a Ayurveda course. And you have around 3 levels of taking training in Ayurveda in the United States, offered by different schools, which are all over United States. You have several institutes in California and various institutes. Like you have the Kripalu School in Massachusetts, and you have the California College of Ayurveda in California, and you have the Mount Madonna Institute in California, and so on. So the first level of training, I think, is around 600 hours, if I'm not mistaken. I can send you the link to get more details later. And which is the Ayurveda Health Counselor or a Health Coach level training, in which a basic training in Ayurveda principles and diet and lifestyle is offered. And then at the next level, you have the Ayurveda practitioner, in which you undergo further training in diagnosing conditions. Although in United States, depending on the state laws, you cannot officially diagnose conditions. You can help people understand their imbalances and then recommend what they could do about it. But that's not recognized equivalent to a medical practitioner. Then I think that's around 1,200 hours of training. And then finally, you have the 4-year course, which is equivalent to the bachelor's course offered here in India, which is offered by one institute in Boulder, Colorado. I think it's called as R&D Institute. And that is by far, that course gives you the doctor level training in Ayurveda.
I see. Okay, thank you. And real quick, what are the 10 tracks, and how, I mean, are the 10 tracks kind of universal for Ayurvedic colleges, or?
Mostly pertaining to India, I would say. So Ayurveda has 8 branches, which it basically has, like how it approaches health and how it approaches disorders and the management of them. Based on those 8 branches of Ayurveda, the current education has been adapted to providing specializations. So you have specializations in core principles of Ayurveda, like students who study the texts of Ayurveda and the manuscripts and understand the principles and the basic principles of Ayurveda, which is the degree in Samhitas meaning our core textbooks of Ayurveda. And they have several sub-specializations in that as well. Those dedicated to studying, ancient philosophies, and then those, dedicated to studying anatomy and physiology equivalents of Ayurveda. That is basic principles, MD. Then you have MD in studying herbs and herbology, which we call as Dravya Guna in Ayurveda. Then you have another specialization which studies kind of pharmacy training, like one which gives training in how to manufacture medicines and the details of how to study medicines, basically what medicines are made up of, how to make them, and how to study their properties, how to understand purities and impurities in medicines, which we call as Rasha Shastra and Vaishajya Kalpana. Bhaishya Kalpana being only making medicines out of herbs, and Rasa Shastra meaning how to purify minerals, various metals, and heavy metals as well, and make them bioavailable and safe for the body. So that is Rasa Shastra. Then you have Kaya Chikitsa, which is kind of equivalent to internal medicine. Then you have Shalakya Tantra, which in which you do MS for ear, nose, and throat, and even eyes. So we have ophthalmology and ENT clubbed into one, which we call as Shalakya Tantra. And the degree offered in India for that is a MS degree, Masters in Surgery. Then you have the Shalya Tantra, which is surgery equivalent in Ayurveda, and Sushruta, Acharya Sushruta is also universally, globally considered as the father of modern surgery. And he has written textbooks in Ayurveda, and that is where the Masters in Surgery comes to Ayurveda, the techniques which are there in the ancient textbooks and which are modernized, or I would say adapted to our current living and used. So that is Shalya Tantra. Then you have Stree Prasuti, which is kind of gynecology and obstetrics. And then you have Kaumar Vritya, which is my specialization, which deals with the health and well-being of mothers, that is maternal health, and health of children up to 16 years of age.
I see. Okay, thank you. Super fascinating explanation, and we understand how this is set up. So, Dr. Samant, what is a typical session with an Ayurvedic physician? So, for example, if I come into your office, what happens? What takes place?
So it's an interesting process, I would say. So typically in an Ayurveda session, once, of course, we get to know like what was the reason for your visit to an Ayurvedic physician, and why did you consider Ayurveda, wherein you give details about what health issues you have or what is bothering you. And after that, once you have told us what is exactly bothering your health, or what do you think is wrong with your health, and what has been bugging you for all this while. And then we start the history taking process, which is quite different in Ayurveda. Apart from taking superficial history as to when did the symptoms start and how did they proceed, and what is happening now, where is it hurting, we take much more details. Like we need details about your, what all other health disorders you have had right from your childhood. So typically sessions with Ayurveda physicians are dreaded, as the longest sessions, and people often, we have had people look at their watch, like, could you be a little quick, with this, but it doesn't. Typically it can last anywhere between 30 minutes to an hour, depending on what kind of history you have. So we take all the history right from your birth till whatever you can provide us. Then we start asking details, which we start gathering information about your prakriti, or which is rough equivalent of body type. It's much more than that, but roughly can be equated to a person's body type or personality. So we start taking questions about that, and we gather information, and we try to analyze what kind of a body type a person must be having. Then we start assessing a patient based on our Ayurveda terminology. We try to understand your appetite, your evacuation, or your natural detoxification processes, whether they are doing fine, not fine, and we gather all the information on those, your bowel movements, and details about urination, its frequency. And then we ask for details about your sleep. No, even if you do not have issues related to your appetite or issues related to your evacuation, this is very, very important information to us. And we ask many, many details, like this, wherein we gather information about the 7 tissues which make up your body according to Ayurveda, or dhatu as we call it. We gather information about the 3 doshas, or bioenergies, we have to simplify the terminology, which govern all the processes in our body. And we try and examine systems as described in Ayurveda, which we call as srotas. So this process can take anywhere between 30 minutes to an hour, based on what a person is looking for.
So very comprehensive then.
Yes.
Yes.
Always.
Yes, very interesting. So coming back to the present times and talking about the coronavirus, what is Ayurveda's approach and interpretation for infectious diseases and viruses, microorganisms in general?
In general. So we do have roughly, we have terminologies for, Ayurvedic understanding of microorganisms probably goes as far as understanding intestinal nematodes and intestinal worm infestations, and we have very detailed descriptions of that. But Ayurveda does not provide information about infectious disorders per se. The reason for that is, see, what everybody must have observed now is not everyone reacts or responds to COVID the same way, right?
Yes.
No two people have the same experience. And it's a very poorly understood ailment as of now. We are just learning about it right now as to what experience an individual is having. These differences are because each individual body will respond to it differently based on what are your susceptibilities, what is your immune system like, which we understand as, Oja in Ayurveda, which maintains vitality of the body, a kind of a core essence of all your tissues. And what you could point out as, how healthy you are is how strong your Oj is. Oj meaning the essence of all your tissues, which maintains your strength and vitality. So while some people might have natural capability to resist any microorganism, infectious microorganism, some don't. And probably that is the reason why Ayurveda does not describe disorders which are caused from outside influences. Yes, we do have mentions of certain diseases which have fatal outcomes and which are always fatal, especially in children, which they have assigned to grahas and supernatural, interventions or inflictions upon a being. But even that cannot be equated to microorganisms and infectious microorganisms. So Ayurveda's understanding of disease is not from external sources, apart from the supernatural understandings of certain things. What Ayurveda believes is that there are imbalances within your body which make you susceptible to diseases. For example, we all have tuberculosis bacteria or bacilli in our lungs and in our respiratory system at all times. But not all of us suffer from tuberculosis. That's because we have the natural capability to fight that infection. Unless you have an imbalance in a certain system, you would not be susceptible to an attack by that microorganism. And that, I would say, is a basic difference between how the modern biomedicine understands that diseases come from outside, whereas Ayurveda believes that diseases are born from within your body. Maybe outside influences, I would say, are just opportunistic events which take place because of the susceptibilities which you have within your own body.
I see. Very interesting. So, Dr. Samant, what about diseases that are not communicable in nature? What is Ayurveda's take on that?
So, most of the diseases, I would say, apart from a few skin-related ailments which are mentioned in Ayurveda, which we call as Kushtha, Ayurveda has given a lot of focus to disorders which are non-communicable. So which we call as the non-communicable chronic disorders, NCCD, as WHO calls them, whether it is anemia or it is certain kinds of jaundice, or it is ascites, that is accumulation of water in your peritoneum, which makes your stomach bulge, or several, So Ayurveda has given a lot of attention to these diseases. I would refrain from saying words like, obesity and diabetes, because what we have description in Ayurveda are very loose, can be very loosely associated with these diseases. So for example, prameha, which is a disease in Ayurveda, which is commonly equated to diabetes, the type 2 diabetes today, it's a very loose translation, I would say, because in Ayurveda, prameha means a very large, it's a very broad umbrella which encompasses many diseases which are caused due to lifestyle ailments. And yes, if you were to describe how Ayurveda advises us to manage them, Ayurveda puts the responsibility on a person of managing their disorders. We provide the solutions. We will give you the diet and lifestyle modifications. But unless there is discipline in terms of the patient taking responsibility of his or her own health, there is no coming out of any disorder. So Ayurveda trusts and believes the process of empowering an individual to be responsible for his or her own health, rather than being a passive and a submissive patient.
I see. Okay. Again, a holistic approach to healing and even approach to
Absolutely.
diseases, right? I
Yes.
see. Okay, and I want to quickly remind us that our chat is open. So if you have questions, please put them in the chat and we will take them one by one. Okay, Dr. Samant, a question related to the pandemic. What type of lifestyle changes can we implement for physical, emotional, and spiritual well-being in day-to-day life? This pandemic has gone on and on and on. What do you suggest?
There are many things. So if we have to categorize it in three categories, like how to change our diet, how to change our lifestyle, and then how to care for our emotional well-being, we could categorize it into three categories and approach this first. So in terms of diet, it needless to say, the amount of processed food that enters our body directly equates or affects our immune system. So how well you're feeling internally will decide how your body is going to respond to the pandemic physically. If your body is extremely unhealthy and clogged with toxins, some of them environmental, that is what enters your body through food, and the environmental toxins like pesticides and chemicals and antibiotics which get fed to the poultry and livestock. If that enters your system, that will work like a toxin. And then you have toxins which are released by your own body, which otherwise should be removed by your system, like your colon or your liver and your kidneys, and thrown out of your body. And if they don't get thrown out effectively due to imbalances which exist within your body, then that is going to affect your immune system, and it's going to cloud your immune responses and lead to complications related to the pandemic. So effectively, when you are taking your diet, it will be helpful. I'm giving a broad kind of advice here today, and it may not be applicable to a few people here, because depending on your body type, what kind of precautions each one needs to take will be different in Ayurveda. We will never have a same advice which will be given to two different people. But on a general guideline, if I have to give people, one is the importance of drinking water. Make sure that you drink water only when you're thirsty, and you're not dunking water, because that general misbelief that body requires a lot of water to detoxify. No, it doesn't. Certain body types may, all don't. So pay attention to your thirst and your natural urges, especially of appetite, of thirst, of evacuating bowel movements, of sleep, and of cough. And Ayurveda describes 9 different body urges, and the 4 which I mentioned are very important to decide how healthy you will be. Eat when you're hungry, drink water and warm water when you're thirsty. Many people ask me the logic as to why how come Ayurveda doctors always insist on drinking warm water, especially with medicines and even otherwise. So we never say drink hot water. We say drink warm water, which is, say, a degree higher than your surface temperature. So when you're drinking water, if the water enters your system, your body is warm from within. So what you put inside should be warm as well. And that helps your body's metabolism to stay healthy, and it helps your body's processes, especially related to digestion, very healthy. Digestion is our port, I would say, like a port of entry for our interactions with the environment in terms of what enters our system, apart from our respiratory system. So that's a very important port. And when you give it warm water, warm food, it works beautifully. And all diseases in Ayurveda originate in the digestive system, and including the response your body will give to the pandemic. So make sure that the water you drink and the food you eat is warm. So certain practices, for example, taking cold milk with cereal, are a complete no-no according to Ayurveda, because when you get up in the morning, you want to give your body something warm to eat. Remember that it's not just fuel. You are giving your body much more than fuel. You are giving your body an interaction. So let it be a good one. So make sure that you include vegetables from the entire rainbow colors. Right? All colors of the rainbow should be on your plate, as we say. Excessive eating of green leafy vegetables, according to Ayurveda, can lead to a lot of clogging in our system. So that is another thing that we strongly recommend, that, you know, do not overeat your greens. So every alternate day or twice a week would be a good frequency. Too much of even very good things is not good for you, and Ayurveda strongly believes in that. Another thing is including herbs and spices in Ayurveda, which are warming to the body. As although it's not like we are understanding different aspects of how COVID affects our body, like it can affect the nervous system, and it can attack your intestines, and it can attack your heart. The major site of where COVID affects us the most is your respiratory system. And respiratory system works very well when you give it warm spices. So certain Indian spices, for example, ginger and cumin and coriander and cloves and nutmeg and cinnamon, are very warm and are an ingredient in many of the Ayurveda medicines, classical medicines, which are made for the respiratory system. So including them in your diet would be a great solution and a great way of increasing your respiratory immunity. We do not recommend taking them as supplements. They have to be taken in terms of food and included in terms of food, and only if they are part of Ayurveda formula, we can be very sure that you know, it will help you. For example, we do not have recommendations to take raw turmeric or turmeric in Ayurveda. That is a complete modernization and medicalization of Ayurveda, and selective usage of Ayurveda, exploitation of Ayurveda, I would say. Ayurveda completely endorses turmeric in terms of food and usage in certain medicines, but it doesn't recommend taking it in your tea and in your coffee or in smoothies. So Ayurveda does not recommend that. Probably in warm soups, which are made out of mung beans and vegetables, would be a great options. Lentils and vegetable soups with turmeric and ginger and spices added to them. And soups really help. And it's even Ayurveda recommends several different preparations of soup to clear congestion in the chest and to clear fever. Also, as fever is one of the main signs of COVID, keeping your diet light really helps. For those people who are not vegetarians or who do not practice veganism, this is not insistence on going vegan, but it's a truth that if you give rest to your digestive system, your body can figure out all the other disease defense related mechanism much more easily and can process toxin in your body much more easily. So taking light diet or a vegan diet and a plant-based diet, less of dairy would really help. In terms of lifestyle, following a good routine in terms of yoga practice and practicing deep breathing and diaphragmatic breathing and pranayama, as we call it, really helps to energize your entire body and especially your respiratory system and detoxifies it. And in terms of emotional well-being, see, many people recommend meditation, and people who are experts in yoga can tell that much better than me, that meditation will really help people get through the emotional turmoil that people are undergoing, seeing people die, and it's a it's a very depressing situation. So people with yoga background would be much more helpful in recommending things for emotional well-being. But then I have a very simple principle for meditation. Whatever work you do in your day-to-day life, whether it is cleaning your house or putting things in place or cooking or your work, office-related professional work, when you do it with 100% concentration and focus and dedication, and when you enjoy it, that itself is a meditative experience, and it can be extremely relaxing. So make sure that you understand simple meditative techniques if you are not a person much into meditation. If you are somebody who has practiced meditation before, then it would be excellent. I wouldn't recommend excessive exercising and, keeping always, keeping your body moving and things like that a lot in this, because each person can handle exercise differently, and each body type can handle exercise differently. And unless you understand your body type, it will be wrong on my part to give a blanket advice that you should do a lot of exercise, because that can be counterproductive if it comes to certain body types which are susceptible to excessive body heat which gets released with the exercise, and that itself can make them prone to disorders.
Yes. Okay, so thank you. And yes, yoga literature says the same thing, right? All these new turmeric latte and this and that. Like, don't overdo it. Take it in the amount that you're supposed to take it. Like, take it with cooking. And we've heard this in other lectures too. There's no need to dump this extra stuff in your body, because that will actually increase the disharmony and imbalance.
Absolutely.
So many traditional schools are just keeping up with this, but yes, consumerism has taken its own turn. Right. Okay. So a couple of questions related to this. First one, going back to the diet, what is the concept of fasting in Ayurveda?
So as I told in the reference of fever and managing fever, Ayurveda doesn't advise through and through fasting. We have a concept called langhana. The concept of fasting is the complete fasting and the water fast and the not eating anything fast typically comes from a naturopathy background and yoga, and it is not from Ayurveda. Ayurveda has a concept called langhana. Langhana means taking less of everything and taking foods which are easily digestible to the body. And this has been endorsed and recommended in the treatment of many conditions, even in conditions pertaining to our mind, which Ayurveda describes. So for example, if somebody suffers from fever, the digestive system is the first one which takes a large hit from that, and a seat where there is a lot of imbalance. If you want to, I would give an example of a clogged drain. If you have a clogged drain or a clogged plumbing system, would you dump more waste in it, or would you allow the existing waste to clear? Absolutely. By reducing the flow of waste into that drainage system, right? So Ayurveda recommends something similar. Of course, this was a very crude analogy that I gave, but Ayurveda recommends something similar. So it advises anybody who has any pathology which in the body involves formation of toxins and undigested stuff which is sitting and creating diseases, the first thing you should go to is langhana. Make sure diet is very light, consisting of soups, easy to digest vegetables, nothing raw. Everything should be cooked and steamed, and mostly in liquid or semi-solid form. You reduce the number of times you eat food, finish your dinner before the sunset, and drink only and only warm water when you are thirsty. So this is the concept of langhana which goes into Ayurveda. Yes, there is fasting involved in certain treatments that we give, panchakarma treatments that we give certain days. There is certain amount of fasting involved, but then it is very strictly monitored, and it's a very structured and a meticulous process which only an expert can guide you through. But if we were to understand just a general concept of fasting, then langhana in Ayurveda is something that you should look for, which has been described differently pertaining to different diseases. What we described here was related to fever.
Okay, thank you. And yes, you're right. Even yoga suggests something like this, something similar. And intermittent fasting, now known in the new health world, contemporary world, but yoga suggests eat twice a day, eat at 11 and then at 7, right, before sunset, and eat no more than 3 things. Why? Because you don't want to confuse your body. And absolutely, when you're not feeling good, reduce what you're taking in just to get that drain unclogged, so to speak. So very good. Right. Thank you for that explanation. Another question that has come in is, in terms of kapha, vata, and pitta doshas, how can COVID be defined in terms of an imbalance?
See, as I said earlier, different person, depending on what dosha you have, will exhibit different levels or different, I would say, presentations of COVID. Now, kapha, vata, and pitta are presenting in each and every body. If we have to loosely understand, for example, excess of kapha dosha in a body will create a lot of phlegm in your respiratory system. You'll cough up a lot of phlegm. You'll feel a lot of heaviness in the chest, and you might have, I would say, a very depressed appetite and loss of taste, and loss of smell, probably because of imbalance of kapha in the COVID. The imbalance of pitta in COVID can give rise to a lot of inflammation in all your system. And please do remember, these are not words which are described by Ayurveda. This is our understanding and a simple and easy way in which people who do not have background in Ayurveda can understand them. But the technical terminology for all this is very different. And some of the Sanskrit words used for them are non-translatable words, We cannot translate them. So inflammation is a word which many people understand, which I would like to use here, which pitta can create. Pitta can also give rise to certain other things like lack of sleep and extreme fatigue and tiredness. Excuse me. So pitta can give rise to a lot of tiredness, and whereas vata component involvement in a condition like COVID will give you body aches and pains. It could give you a headache, a lot of muscle pains, breathlessness, and I would say complete debility and weight loss, which happens to people, happens because of excessive vata imbalance. Each one of us has all the three doshas, and even body types are never, I would say, like, it'll be wrong on our part to say that somebody has only a single dosha dominant. That's very rare. Somebody can have it, but the most common body types or prakriti in Ayurveda are made up by two doshas.
Right.
A combination of those three. And always and always there will be involvement of more than one dosha in disorders. So I would say on a very superficial basis, this would be a way to understand how different symptoms of COVID could be attributed to the three doshas.
Okay, thank you. Shifting the line of questioning a little bit, we know that in traditional, meaning Western research and science, there is a particular way where new things are invented, new methodologies, new medicines, right? But then how does this translate to Ayurveda? Like, what is the method of inventing new pharmacological stuff and going through clinical trials? What is the process?
So you mean to say, how do we research Ayurveda, which is existing?
So how are new things invented, and how are they, I guess, verified? I'm sure there's some governing body, especially in India.
Yeah. So you mean to say the different medicines which are being introduced in Ayurveda, what is the basis for that?
What is the process for that? Yes.
So yes, we have the Ministry of Ayush in India, which encompasses all the traditional medicines in India, like Ayurveda and yoga, and it also includes homeopathy under its umbrella. So Ayush body governs most of the licensure which is given for Ayurveda medicines. Then there are state governing bodies also, which give the licensing to new herbs and new drugs. Any proprietary medicine, that is any medicine which is not a classical Ayurveda medicine, a combination of herbs which might have a similar effect, they need to show their clinical studies and preferably double-blind, control-based studies. They need to show them. However, it could depend from state to state. Many of the herbs, if say like 3 or 4 herbs are traditionally mentioned in Ayurveda that they have an impact on the skin, then sometimes they are approved based on the empirical knowledge which is present about those herbs. However, if it's a new herb, for example, I would give example of Noni Fruit. People might have heard, like it's very famous in the cancer treatment and especially in the treatment of breast cancer. So Noni is a fruit, and that has been included in the umbrella of Ayurveda recently. It's a traditional herb which gets used not just in India, but many other countries. So the assessment of that herb as to what impact it has on the body and everything is taken up by different research bodies present, which work for Ayurveda medicines. For example, we have the CCRAS, which deals with the research in Ayurveda of new herbs and new medicines and so on. So typically there will be a lot of research study which will go on. But then there are ways in which people can formulate new Ayurveda medicines based on the empirical information which is present about those herbs. So for example, somebody can combine amla and turmeric and certain other herb in Ayurveda, for example, guduchi or amrita as we know it, and make a new combination of theirs, given the fact that all 3 of them have impact on fever, or all 3 of them help in in impaired insulin mechanism or impaired insulin responses, and make a new medicine of their own.
I see. Okay, thank you. And a question. Ayurveda's approach to mental disorders and mental health hygiene.
Sorry, can you come again on that?
Yes, what is Ayurveda's approach to mental disorders and mental health in general?
Ayurveda has a lot to contribute in that area, and what Ayurveda we see here is a very narrow approach to Ayurveda, wherein we only see Ayurveda for healing different diseases. Ayurveda has a lot to offer in terms of for mental health, or not just of an individual, but mental health of societies and the world as a whole. There's a concept in Ayurveda called Achara Rasayanam, which means things which need to be adopted by an individual to discipline them mentally in terms of their thoughts and thought processes, which will make them, I would say, a person who is not just somebody who lives a very fulfilling and a very healthy life, emotionally and spiritually, but also becomes a very productive member and a very positive force in the society as a whole. So Achar Rasayana is a solution which is given by Ayurveda in terms of what are the do's and don'ts in terms of a person's behavior. And that is something which is the least explored, I would say, in terms of potential of Ayurveda. In terms of mental disorders, yes, we do have a mental aspect, or what are the symptoms which are exhibited by an individual on the level of mind pertaining to each and every disease. Mm-hmm. And there are certain diseases which are only psychological and emotional, related to psychological emotional well-being, which are described in Ayurveda. So the treatment for them as well is that detailed. And one of them, as I told you, is Achara Rasayana, how to ensure that, a person, what measures and steps a person takes, and that if implemented can make that person manage their mental and emotional well-being right from their childhood to make them a very mentally and emotionally balanced person. However, if you say in terms of, say, herbs and medicines, we have several which have a positive impact on the mind and which can help to boost mental and emotional well-being. But yes, I would not give out names of herbs because that will reduce it to a very superficial level and it may not be applicable to all.
Okay, I see. Thank you. Yes, we have another kind of related question. If each person has a different body type, does a general herbal formula or I don't know the word here. Is there a general herbal formula advisable for different body types suffering from the same type of illness?
No, actually not. However, the Ministry of Ayush, I think this is pertaining to that. So Ministry of Ayush gave a single herb combination kind of a thing, like, combine these easily available things and it will help you kind of boost your immunity or at least keep it in a good shape. Although it might not fit all the body types perfectly, but at a very loose level, it was to involve communities and to encourage communities to start taking care of their health. Even now, although the Ayush Kada versions of it are marketed very popularly here in India, I wouldn't say that is like a one-stop kind of a solution for anything. Whether you make a Kada for COVID or any other disease, there's no single medicine which can treat same condition in different people owing to their different body types. However, it's a good start to encourage people to kind of go back to their roots rather than being passive sufferers here. It is just to encourage people to say that, if you take interest in your own health and if you try to understand what suits you or doesn't, there is a way that you can take care of your health. So it was a good try, I would say, although not a very accurate one.
I see. Okay, thank you. Another question. Elders say, eat what your ancestors used to eat. Now that we travel across the globe, is it okay to start adopting to local foods where we relocate as per Ayurveda?
Absolutely. So there are two concepts in Ayurveda. Where did you take birth and where do you grow up or where you are staying? So both these concepts are explained very well in Ayurveda as to, like, what are the characteristics, physical characteristics and disease resisting qualities or physical strength of people who are born in certain regions. So that has been described really well in Ayurveda. And yes, Ayurveda does not always say that, you eat where you come from or nothing like that. Although it does say that eat according to where you're staying. For example, if somebody is staying in a very marshy or a wet area, which is Ayurveda describes three different kind of, I would say, environments in which we can exist, or three different kind of lands in which we can live. One of them is an area which is abundant in water and which is very damp and humid. And then it advises, if you are living in such an area, make sure that your diet and lifestyle is something which balances the kapha, which can increase in that kind of an environment. So make sure you take a lot of care of your digestion, which can easily kind of go down, and your metabolism will suffer if you stay in such areas. And then start eating so that you can balance what impact that environment and that nature interaction with that nature is having on you. And of course, because I said even in the beginning that Ayurveda firmly believes that there are fundamental similarities and commonalities between an individual and the nature in which he or she stays. So there is a constant interaction between you and the nature. And that is what is the meaning of holistic health, when Ayurveda means holistic health in this sense, not just of your body, mind, and soul. The holistic in Ayurveda means what interaction your body is having with the environment and the nature that you're living in. So for you to intuitively start responding and kind of synchronizing with the changes in the place that you're living is completely recommended in Ayurveda. So see what place you live and what naturally grows in that place. It doesn't mean what is easily available over there. You need to have an intrinsic understanding of what grows in that land naturally. So that probably is the advice given by Ayurveda in terms of how to eat. If you are a person who is changing places constantly, have an understanding of your nature. That's what holistic means, after all. It will take efforts, it will definitely take efforts. And that's what I said when I said Ayurveda encourages people to be empowered and to be very involved in taking care of their health and not to expect health as an entitlement.
I see. Dr. Samant, relatedly, I have a question. What about eating things that are in season versus out of season? For example, in Houston, we get things all year round, which is not technically, according to nature, not in season. So what do you say about that?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as these techniques did not exist in the time when Ayurveda was probably conceived, eating things which are out of season is completely a concept which is not supported by Ayurveda. The basic concepts and the advice that Ayurveda gives a person to kind of, we have a detailed concept of Rutucharya, in which how a person should take care of health depending on changing seasons and what we can expect, what kind of changes will take in our body, and what kind of diseases can occur in particular season has been given in details in Ayurveda. And Rutucharya is an advice which is given for people to follow so that they do not fall sick or they do not experience imbalances during different seasons. And Ayurveda says that observe your body and it will mirror the changes what your environment is undergoing. For example, the dryness of winters and the cold, dry air of the winter can cause dryness in our skin. And that is one of the most common examples that we can observe, that our body is responding to the season. So eating unseasonal fruits and vegetables, although the reason why it is popular in people is because it does not cause an immediate ailment. The effects are not immediate. And whatever doesn't have immediate outcomes is something which doesn't go out of fashion very soon. We do not understand the seriousness of doing things which do not have immediate outcomes, whether it is lack of exercise, which will lead to imbalance of fat metabolism in your body or fat as a tissue in your body, or whether it is eating things which are rich in fat, which will ultimately clog your arteries someday. These do not have immediate outcomes. Your artery will not get clogged tomorrow if you had it for dinner today, right? So there is no seriousness. And same thing applies even to eating things which are not in season. They do not have immediate outcomes. But if you see the rising incidence of different lifestyle-related disorders or inflammatory disorders or autoimmune disorders in our community, or neurodegenerative disorders like Alzheimer's and Parkinson's, although we do not have a direct connection to eating things which are not out of season and these diseases, still, maybe at some level, they are a culprit, eating things. So Ayurveda does not support. Understanding what grows in your area and what is seasonal in your area is a very basic knowledge, which is as basic as finding an apartment and, basic things to live in when you move into an area. This is the next thing probably somebody should do. What grows here and how can I optimize my diet so that my body adapts to this particular place better?
Absolutely. Okay, thank you for that. One of the questions has come in. Is the practice of gold therapy, Suvarna Prashan, for kids really supported by Ayurveda?
Yes and no, both. Yes, because Suvarna Prashana is recommended in Kashyapacharya. Kashyapa Samhita is one of the major textbooks which we study, which I study, have studied, and am studying even now for Kaumara Bhritya, which is a branch of Ayurveda which deals with maternal and child health. So Suvarna Prashana is one of the first things which is mentioned in that Samhita as something which, when given to a child between the age of 1 month, 1 day old, to continuously till the infant is 6 months old, will help in improving immunity and will help in boosting longevity and general health of the child. Yes, it is completely supported. However, the current adaptation of it, what is being followed in India, may not be what exactly is told in Ayurveda. Then the particular time that people follow here, the Pushya Nakshatra in which it is given to children here in India, that reference is not from Kashyap Samhita. It is from a different textbook and in a different context in which they believe that anything when done, anything related to health, when done, when the Pushya Nakshatra constellation is governing our day on a particular day of the month, that is when the practices related to health are most successful. So I think they have amalgamated two different practices and have come up with, again, a commercialization of certain concepts of Ayurveda. But Suvarna Prashana, yes, it is given in Ayurveda, but the current adaptation is not something which is exactly present in our textbooks.
I see. Okay, thank you. Another question, as far as you know, is Parijatam used for anything related to COVID? Any kind of studies?
Some people are using it, but as far as my knowledge goes, the leaves of Parijata, the herb which gives the white color flowers, it's also very auspicious for Hindu religion. So the leaves of Parijata are used for treating certain hormonal imbalances and certain conditions related to joints, which we can equate to gout, gouty arthritis, in which you have high uric acid levels. Although this is a very loose understanding, please, this is for general understanding. This is not how it happens, and we wouldn't give Parijat to every single person who walks in with this kind of ailment. However, on a broader idea, it is used for this, but I haven't seen it being used for COVID, at least in my practice here in Bangalore.
I see. Thank you. While we wait for maybe a couple more questions, I will ask a question.
Sure.
For example, we'll just take Parijatam just as an herb example. What is the difference between an herb that grows on the ground in India in a particular climate, in a particular region, versus another region, or in the United States? Like, how do we evaluate the efficacy of something that comes from different climate, but then the species of the herb is the same? What is Ayurveda's take on this?
Ayurveda has given this understanding of herbs a lot. As I mentioned, Ayurveda understands landforms in three types. One which is an arid landform, which is similar to a desert. Then you have another landform which is kind of balanced, which receives just the right amount of sun and the right amount of water, and is a very fertile land. And then you have a land which is very damp and marshy, which is humid all year round or receives a lot of rainfall. Depending on these three classifications of land, as well as depending on particular places from where a herb comes from, Ayurveda does go into the depths of describing the qualities of herbs which comes from different areas and what it might be used for. The same herb, for example, I'm not sure here, but there is a herb called pippali or long pepper, Piper longum, which is very, which is very effective again in treating chest congestion in certain body types who might be having chest-related conditions. So the qualities of pippali, which comes from different areas in those regions, like they have described regions, like if it comes from Magadha area, which is today's Bihar and kind of Orissa, it will have these properties, or if it comes from this particular area, it will have a different quality. So that concept is existent. Take example of aloe vera, which most people will be able to relate to. Aloe vera growing in a marshy area, say for example, I would say Florida, certain areas, right, which are marshy in Florida, probably in the Keys. So it will be more waterlogged, and the taste of that will be much more diluted. It will not be very bitter. To start with, aloe vera is an extremely bitter herb, but depends on where it grows and of course on the variety. There are more than 30 varieties of aloe vera. So if you have to take the medicinal one, if it grows in a marshy area with a more waterlogged soil, then it will be very, diluted, and its efficacy might not be the same. Whereas, given the fact that aloe vera is basically a succulent or a cactus, a variety of cactus, if it grows in an area which is much more desert-like, say, for example, Arizona, then it will be very concentrated, and its efficacy will be much more, powerful and stronger. For example, I studied in Jamnagar. I was just talking to Anjali, before the session started, that I was trained, my post-graduation was from Jamnagar, which is in Gujarat. And certain areas of Gujarat, even Jamnagar, are quite arid. They don't receive as much rainfall and are quite desert-like. So the aloe vera which grows there is completely different than aloe vera which grows in Goa, which is a very damp and an area which has monsoon almost for 8 months of the year. So while I was used to tasting aloe vera which hardly has any taste and which is more water-like with a faint, probably trace of bitterness, I was taken by shock when I tasted aloe vera from the Gujarat, in which the leaves were, I would say, very thick and very robust plant, and which is extremely bitter, a bitterness which wouldn't leave your tongue for days together, kind of bitterness, So depending on an area, of course, the qualities of plants change. And for you to understand like how a same herb growing in different regions will change its properties will require a basic understanding of the description in Ayurveda regarding basic landforms and, of course, doshas and what impact those doshas have on our body.
So in short, I mean, all this is very comprehensive, and I mean, this is a great explanation, so thank you. Probably one last question. What does Ayurveda have to say about marijuana and other types of intoxicants?
So marijuana, or bhanga as we call it in Ayurveda, is a part of many classical Ayurveda formulations and is used in many medicines which are pain relieving medicines in Ayurveda. So extreme pain conditions do include purified marijuana in Ayurveda medicine. However, in terms of legalities, there are certain companies which the process of acquiring licensure here in India for using marijuana for medication is quite detailed. Although I'm not the right person to answer this question about the legalities. As far as my knowledge goes, the commercially available products here in India are very limited. However, there are certain companies which have come up with purified marijuana, which is being used for conditions with extreme pain experiences like amavata or similar to rheumatoid arthritis or ankylosing spondylitis, again, which is affects your spine and kind of fuses your spine together due to extreme inflammation in the spine tissue. Form scars in the areas where your spine would have been flexible otherwise. So we do have certain medicines which are coming up of marijuana, but because given the fact that I do not specialize in that area wherein we deal with pain and pain related disorders here, my experience on this is quite limited, and this is what I know about it.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you so much for this. I just want to bring up like a yoga related thing about marijuana. Meditators experience this immense joy without intaking any substance, right? So we know that our brain has receptors for these kinds of things. And of course, for Ayurveda, we're talking about pain, but just from the yoga perspective too, it's a similar thing, right? Where our body is set to receive this stuff, but probably only for temporary highs, so to speak. So for a permanent high in yoga, you don't want to take a substance.
Absolutely. And I think this question was not from a substance kind of a, I don't think it was from the perspective of recreation. If you were like marijuana is also a very powerful herb which is used for pain relief. So the purification process involves taking care of the factors which can give you a high. So there are very detailed processes of purification of marijuana which are described in Ayurveda so that it becomes fit to be used at all age groups. So yes, we do have the references and it is a part of many classical Ayurveda formulations, but the regulations of that, as I said, may be different given the times. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Well, thank you, Dr. Samant, for your time. We really appreciate it. Again, thank you for those who joined also. We could all be doing something else, but here we are. So I want to thank you for your time. And with this, we can bring this event to a close. So thank you again. And everyone have a good rest of the weekend. Thank you, Dr. Samant.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Okay, bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.